Today, I'm having a guest with Shaun McIlrath, Chief Creative Officer here at Iris Worldwide. And it's unlike the other ones I filmed on the actual banks of the river. It's a beautiful day. And thanks for taking time out of your obviously packed schedule. But we were just talking off mic a minute ago about how the schedules are changing rapidly as the markets are. Why don't we start just by giving me a picture of what's going on out there at the moment?
I think there's a lot of people making plans, breaking plans, worrying about plans, planning, and I think what we're seeing is some of the plans that were in existence have just been canned, and people are retrenching, coming up with new ideas, and literally as you just said. The market is as volatile as the markets. You know, people aren't quite sure whether the existing strategy they had is going to be sustainable, and therefore they're moving to become much more tactical at the moment. That's my experience. Anyway.
So at the front end of it, which I describe agencies as being at the front end of it insofar as you're directly with the brands, and they're usually directly in a relationship with the consumer. At the front end of it, how long has it felt genuinely volatile? Because for anyone who might possibly be watching in the future, it is October 27th, 2022, and a rough recent timeline of domestic affairs is Boris Johnson resigned as Prime Minister at the beginning of the summer. We had a sort of reality show over the summer of Truss or Sunak. Truss got in. There was an emergency budget, and that sent financial markets into a fit of panic, which caused a subsequent effect of potential rise in interest rates, which basically hits the middle class. And so they threw Liz Truss straight out because that's, the who votes Conservative, if not homeowners. But that was about, 4 or 5 weeks ago that all that started?
Yeah. But I would say most clients have been anticipating this for quite some time. I think they've seen a softening in sales towards the end of the summer. And then I think a lot of C-suite decisions were being made maybe 2 months ago around, they're either going for it or they're not going for it. And I think a lot of people, it's like a canary in a coal mine. The first thing you hear in a downturn is let's cut our advertising budgets.
Right.
The second thing you hear is the ad industry going, you should be advertising the whole way through this. But the fact that there is so much advertising being cut, I think, is probably down to the fact that it's the advertising industry saying this.
You think that the advertising industry actually perhaps exacerbates the damage by saying you should be upping your spend on us?
I don't think maybe not exacerbates. It's just it's not credible. It's not as credible coming from it sounds self-serving coming from the industry saying you need to be in spite of the fact that there are libraries of well-documented evidence that shows continued investment in the brand through a recession is a really good thing to do. It's a Pavlovian reaction, and it's CFOs just taking chainsaws to their marketing budgets because it's an easily controllable outgoing.
As in, because most businesses exist on a straightforward money in, money out situation. At some level, you can simplify it all to the balance sheet, income and outgoings. And the significant outgoings that are harder to cut, I'm imagining, as someone who's never really run a big business, are things like wages. And, you don't, the worst thing anyone wants to ever say or hear is redundancies.
Yeah.
And so the first thing you will instead go for is your very expensive Soho-based, advertising agency with 5 floors and eye-watering costs for big promotion. They just see that as a much more compassionate cut.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, and a lot of organizations are all different, so it's difficult to generalize about it. But a lot of organizations view marketing as a cost as opposed to an investment, and that is a simple accountancy view that makes it really difficult to justify. Whereas if you say this organization exists primarily because of its relationship with consumers. Should we not be investing in that at this point in time? I think you might view it differently, but it is an accountancy first point of view.
Where were you in 2008, which I think is the most recent example of similar worries?
I joined here in 2008, actually, interestingly. And I'm seeing a lot of the similar behaviors. What tends to happen in a recession in ad land is organizations like ours, which more generalized creative problem solving becomes, we do quite well in downturns historically.
Because you don't just do pure promotion. You advise on different creative ways to get across to your customers.
Yeah. And what I'd say is we will never sell advertising if we don't think advertising is the right solution.
Right.
Because we're fortunate enough to have so many disciplines in-house, so many ways of solving a problem, that we can look at it and go, okay, we get that you do not have the money to put into a massive brand investment at this moment in time. But if we do this, this, and this, then that's going to really help you with the budget you've got. So it's there is an ability. There's nothing. We, as an industry, we're at our most obnoxious when we sell our product at the expense of potentially selling the client's product. When we're trying to flog advertising, when advertising isn't necessarily the right solution. And that can be, it may not necessarily be the right solution for a variety of reasons, one of which may be you just don't have the money to do the job properly.
Yeah. Chris, our videographer, who is never seen but always there, will testify to the fact that I mention Mad Men in every single podcast.
Right.
And I think that's obviously because we're talking about advertising, and very much like an Aaron Sorkin drama, a fictionalized account of advertising has in it all of the things that you would like to say in, or an idealized version of what you would be like in real life, these perfect pictures where the clients just go, whoa, that's so good, here's all the money. There's a moment where Draper says, I sell products, not advertising. And that's kind of what you were expressing there. It's kind of like what the Saatchi brothers said at the beginning of their journey, which is that you have to imagine that you are the one with the inventory that needs to be shifted. You are not just selling your greatness. You're actually selling your clients, whatever they're doing.
It may be with my tenure in advertising. I've been doing this for like 30 years now. That you become more and more aware of the fact that behind the advertising brief is a company, there's like the marketing department who you're dealing with. There may be the C-suite that you're presenting to when it's like a big campaign. But behind that, there are the warehouses and the factory. There are a lot of people's jobs on the line.
Yep.
And it's quite humbling.
Yep.
So it does, when you see that, when you're aware of that, it becomes beholden on you to, do the right thing. And actually, the whole way that Aris has been built up in terms of lots of different disciplines working together is because it's given us the ability to offer unbiased solution. If you sell advertising, if that's all you've got, you're always going to sell it. It's that old thing. If you're a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail. And it's so important, especially today. Once upon a time, advertising was a kind of a penicillin, a cure-all, but the reality is, because of technology over the last few years, you can cut right through to the reality of the product. And they say, and it's especially true at the moment. So Warren Buffett has a quote that says, "When the tide goes out," about investment. He says, "When the tide goes out, you can see who's swimming naked." And the same is true of advertising in the recession. When you cut your advertising budget, when you remove the cosmetic of advertising, you see the reality of the product. And it isn't always very pretty. And the reason it isn't always very pretty is because a lot of companies, and I've sat in a lot of boardrooms, so I know that a lot of companies are too disconnected from their consumers. They're going through the motions of marketing, and they think they're doing the right thing. They're playing lip service to it. But then if you say, how are you really competing to create a better experience for your customer? There'll be a lot of blank faces in the room.
similar to the Warren Buffett quote you just mentioned. You're saying when the market turns down and things become more economically challenging, you will see who's really creative, and you will see who's actually working to a formula.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that has always been a bit of my bugbear, and I'm on the record for having to go at the industry about this quite a bit, is that our definition of creativity is so limited.
It's films and pictures and words.
And how creative is that as a solution? And also, we're in the business of differentiation. And if your ability to differentiate your offering boils down to having a slightly funnier or more surreal sales skit this month than a competitor, then you've hobbled yourself. We're toast. So we've got to, as an organization, look to. For me, it was about going back to what is the core function of an agency, and the core function of an agency historically has been a creative intermediary between brands and consumers. Mm-hmm. Once upon a time, that was on behalf. We deployed creativity on behalf of the brand to change the behavior of the consumer. That was pre-internet.
Right.
Now, I would say the future version of it, or the current version here, but the way the industry has to go, is that we should. It's a dialogue, and we should be able to deploy creativity on behalf of the customer to change the behavior of the organization as well. We should be able to go back to our clients and go, you know what's screwing you up here is that your service is terrible, and actually, if we have a think about this, we can make this really fun. Mm-hmm. We can make this really enjoyable for customers. Or, I talk a lot about, we all got into the business for to create ads that our mums would see or our mates would see, to create a poster or a TV ad, to create a presence for a product. And actually, more and more of what we do here, the most creative work actually creates an absence. It's an idea that that ends up, the way it manifests is an absence of a cue, of a complaint, of something that is disagreeable. So for us, it's really about deploying creativity at every touch point of the where the consumer might come into contact with the organization.
A lot of reductive behavior, trying to reduce the negatives instead of merely just either transforming the negatives or accentuating the positives.
Yeah, and a lot of what we do is map the barriers between the brand and the consumer. And then my definition of good creative is anything that ingeniously removes a barrier or creates another reason to engage with the company. And
the removal of a barrier is the precondition for the transformation in advertising that you're talking about. Now, that's a very wordy sentence, sounds a bit pretentious, but what I mean is, you talked about the fact that at one point, advertising was a penicillin cure-all monologue, you said off mic as well, which is to say that there was a narrow selection of media channels.
Yeah.
And if you could afford to be a loud voice on them, then you would win a share of the market.
Yeah.
And then roughly 2002 to 2008, the landscape transforms, and all of a sudden, everyone has a way of talking back.
Yeah.
And then, it sounds like you were describing one of the USPs of Iris is that you try and think of ways to get to people on all of those new levels, not just these big brand communication channels that we're all nostalgic about the glory days of.
Yeah.
And they're not coming back.
They're not coming back. I mean, I think film has had a renaissance in the last 10 or 11 years because we all like to watch. It's a very, it works in the digital medium. It's a quick way to create an emotive connection with your consumer. So that's not going to go away, but it's a tiny part of the journey. People, there's a lot of chat these days about CX, but I've always thought that everything is customer experience, and advertising is a part of CX.
Yeah.
That's the way I experience it on television, or that's the way I experience it on my way to work on a poster. But we've all worked on brands where we've done some really good advertising. It's killed the brand because the brand was terrible.
Right.
So there's an old saying that the fastest way to kill a brand is a bad brand is good advertising.
Why is it? Because people are too suspicious about the smoke and mirrors?
Because it drives people to try the product, and the product is poor, and therefore that they'll never do it again. So there is it is beholden on us to be more creative in our approach to brands generally, and because we're customer representatives in the room. So if we go, but we it's a difference between product propaganda. Yeah, we can go out and sing your song as beautifully and as poetically as we possibly can. But the reality is, as a punter, I used your service the other day and it was terrible.
Yep.
And you need to fix this and this. And that's not just anecdotally. It's not just me, an obnoxious ad bloke sitting in your boardroom telling you that your product's poor. Here, listen to a whole lot of your consumers.
Yep.
So you can spend a lot of money creating advertising that flushes people down the funnel, but if it's a leaky funnel, you're wasting your money. So it's not about great creativity from the future of our industry. Shouldn't just be about creating better comms. It should be about creating better companies. And the reason for that is because these days, what a company is far more eloquent than what the company says. Mm-hmm. And we can access that in a second online.
Right.
We can access the reality of the organization beyond the myth of the brand.
I can't remember if when we spoke a few weeks back came to just test the ground to see if the conversation would be good. I can't remember if we spoke about the what's the word I'm looking for? The over enthusiasm in Adland discussion circles about things like the metaverse. Mm-hmm. About the betting on the brilliance of future comms channels that don't yet exist. Yeah, and kind of not really making the most of what we've got right now.
Yeah, I think there's a rush to the new, a fascination with the new in the industry that is. Yeah, on one hand is absolutely right. On the other hand, is a little excessive and puppy-like in terms of its enthusiasm. And we jump there often quite a bit before consumers do, and we get overexcited about it. And what I notice is, I've seen this happen quite a few times now over the years, is the first people into the new technologies or the new disciplines are the smoke and mirrors guys. They're the salesmen. They can't actually do it more often than not, but they have all the language, mm-hmm. and they make a living out of going into boardrooms and baffling people,
saying this is going to transform you into the leader of everything.
Yeah, and all the jargon is there, and everybody goes, "Oh wow, jargon." Yep. That's And then the second generation are the people, the simplifiers. The people who come in and go, actually, this is just another way of doing that. Mm-hmm. And if we do it like this, it'll really work. And so, I would say be wary of the first wave of jargon wielding berserkers, and wait for wait for keep an eye on it. And they're not all talking bollocks, but quite a lot of them are. And look for the timeless principles. I think it was John Hegarty said, practices may change, but principles remain the same.
Yeah. I was reminded of that when you mentioned before, going to see the actual working end of the brands that you represent, and seeing whose lives are on the line when you're trying to promote, increase their sales. There's some, I think there's another ad industry sort of legend about Hegarty touring the Audi production facility and coming up with Vorsprung Technik.
Yeah.
Well, I probably butchered that because I don't speak German, but do you think that's the value of going to see the working end of it? You get to see this is the real part of the business.
God, yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing is this sort of endless navel gazing, and one of the issues with our industry is we hire clever people and we pay them to be clever, and we don't pay them to be simple. And simple is clever, it's so I've been in countless meetings where people are wanging on about Gen Z, and they've got all these statistics and facts, and my kids are Gen Z, and I literally every Friday night I have in effect a Gen Z focus group going on in my kitchen. and they're pretty much the same as we were. Their language is different, and their views are in some cases more enlightened, in some cases not, and but they're pretty much the same. So we create a science. We feel the need to dress stuff up as being clever, when actually we should be stripping it back and finding what's simple and true about it.
Like we sell or else.
Yeah.
On the Gen Z point you mentioned, I do share the frustration there, which is to say that firstly, I feel like what happens is every generation of teenagers necessarily creates their own culture purely so that they do not have anything in common with their parents. That's the point of it. And then we make the assumption that we've seen all the teenagers that there are ever going to be now. And then, oh no, there's another cohort and they're really weird compared to the last one. It's just what teenagers are. The point of them is to distance themselves from the adults. Yeah. And I don't think they would appreciate all these marketing agencies generating big reports to try and understand them.
They would absolutely hate it. And again, what is the point of it? It's something that's been packaged up to be sold.
Yes. And is it to make you look like an expert consultant?
Yeah. It's a racket. I would much rather have somebody come in here and tell me one real truth, one amazing insight. You don't need 70 slides to do that. And it's a bit like business books. Business books are a flawed medium because more often than not, there is somebody's got one good idea, one really good observation. But to sell a book, you need 300 pages.
Yes.
So they've stretched it out forever, and it's painful. And
eventually, it's transparent, so it's been stretched out so thin. Yeah. The other thing about Gen Z, you kind of mentioned that there's often this heavy implication that they are, in some special way, more morally enlightened than any generation that's ever come before them. And I feel like that, again, is very also characteristic of youth culture generally. The punk movement was the same.
Yeah.
And the punks are all now in their 60s, you know?
Yeah. And the boomers were the original hippies.
Yeah.
It's like, it's true of a time, and it's also a reaction. The boomers of the 60s were reacting to the conformity of post-war parents who were just, who they saw as wage slaves.
Yeah.
And everything, as you say, is a reaction. And it's interesting to watch that and monitor it. But I think they... It's such a difficult area. I think they're much more aware of how they should be seen, and they're very good. They're one thing I am amazed by is how articulate they are about mental health.
The powers of articulation and knowledge on this subject.
Yeah,
and I feel like it's something I hadn't really considered until now. That every generation of youth culture had something that's just about filtered through to become mainstream, just as they're taking up, their place in the world. And I feel like mental health is probably the one for Gen Z. For us, I think I can say with some degree of confidence that it was climate change, because it was mainstream enough to be taught in geography and science when I was in school. Yeah. And I imagine, respectfully, I'm not going to ask when you were at school, but I imagine that wasn't on the curriculum.
No. There was the early 80s when I left school, so I think we were pretty much back where we are now. We were like, was Russia going to nuke us?
Yes, yeah.
We had a ultra right wing government. Mm-hmm. We had, there is a lot of. There are a lot of comparisons to be drawn between it, but no, climate wasn't really on the. We were being told that we needed to prepare for the era of leisure, because that was what technology was going to bring in.
Right.
If only they knew.
Yes, if only they knew that what we are is basically we are capacity fillers. If we have more headroom, we will fill it with more work.
Yeah.
So all of the things that provide us with leisure time actually provided us with just more work time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
technology did not free us at all. It has enslaved us to an incredible degree.
Yes, I remember seeing something went very viral on advertising LinkedIn a couple of years ago. Someone said, do you remember, again, it's nostalgia for the old days of narrow comms channels. Do you remember when advertising was just, I don't know, turning up and having I don't work in advertising, as you can tell, but, creative concepting, meeting with the clients, doing the work, basically that. And they said, now it's all just Zooms and Teams, and you have to do decks and these 70 slide presentations. And basically we found a load of creative new ways to play with all these gadgets and use them when pitching.
Yeah, I mean, we are an industry in flux, and if you take a step back and look at what's happened to the industry over the, since that golden era. So if you look at it back in the 70s and 80s, advertising effectively owned the manufacturing and distribution of commercial messages, the advertising industry. So,
as in they owned all media
if
channels.
you wanted to make an ad, you went to an advertising industry. I mean, of course, you could do like a crappy local ad, like people still do.
There was no Google.
But there's no Google, and if you wanted to place an ad, you did it through the advertising agency. So manufacturing and distribution was owned by the industry. Then distribution got hived off, so media agencies became separate. Then the internet came along, and you've got your Googles, you've got social media. Mm-hmm. People can self-publish, brands can publish, and then and at the same time, you've kids doing amazing stuff in their bedrooms on their iPhones that are funnier and more and quicker and more relevant than agencies are producing over 9 months.
Yes.
So you've got an industry that has got some real skills, but has not been able yet to work out how to apply them. And at the same time, you've got a financial model that is a bit fucked.
Because it's based on the old way.
Because it's based on the old way, and they're still coming to terms with, there's not a realization that we've lost the manufacturing distribution. So, you look at different sorts of agencies where you've got content creators, and you've got a different platform. Content creators control the manufacturing and distribution. They own the audience, and they make it themselves.
Who are you describing here?
I'm like a Mr. Beast So you've got you take that model where, first of all, you've got your audience, then you've got brands approaching you, then you are the brand, and then you're opening your burger chains and your whatever. So there's some really fascinating stuff happening out there, but it's happening organically. And when you are a big group, a big legacy network that's been around forever, you've got machinery that you're going to have to dismantle. But how do you do that when people still pay for it? And there's a belief in the organization that that's what we do, and we've got to sell that and protect it at all costs. So
I suppose in real terms, it's only been very recently that it's transformed in the last 20 years.
Yeah,
that big Google transformation.
I think, definitely. And then and everything seismic, the ripples, the ripples were there, but but we're really feeling it now, I think.
Do you remember the first time seeing that a brand had, I don't know, a social media department, being like, what?
Yeah.
That wasn't there 2 days ago.
I think, there's so much ability to in-house now because you can control the manufacturing and the distribution. You can do it yourself. So I think, you look at in-housing's quite interesting. I think some of it's really good. And historically, the first brand that I was aware of doing it themselves was Specsavers.
Yeah.
Did a brilliant job.
Yeah.
Really good. And, some have done it less successfully, but it ain't going to go away, nor should it.
It sounds like one of the things that it sounds like a burden of responsibility you're placing on the industry is you've actually got to be what it says on the tin. You actually have to be creative.
Yeah.
You can't just be using those same old techniques. And also non-creative adaptations to the new climate are just as insubstantial. You can't, for example, just hire an influencer to put your brand's clothing on or whatever and just hope that does the job.
We live in a world where everyone is creative.
Yes.
That's the phrase. And so therefore, if you have creative in your job title or the title of your business, if you work in a creative agency, it is beholden upon you to actually do something fucking creative,
Yeah.
And that can be big or small, but what I slightly despair about the industry is that we should be having these debates, like really having these debates. We should be working out what is poor legacy behavior, where we need to be leaning in the future. I think we're probably all a bit too competitive to have those conversations openly.
Because we're worried about giving our IP away or just looking bad in front of...
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, probably. But it's like, I'm a great believer in, it's like an idea is worthless unless it happens.
Yeah.
So just, and we're not all going to be around forever. So just get it out there. And if it happens, then, you can profit from that. You can, even if you don't do it yourself, you can see how somebody else is doing it and do the next iteration of it. There's back in the day, I set up a company called Heresy, and it was doing, we set it up out of HHCL, and it was a radical sort of customer-centric agency, which was about creating.
Was this the agency brands. You set up with Lord Bell?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, he was backing it. And we created brands like Ocado, and it was really detailed sort of, how do you create something that consumers are really going to want? But then we hit a recession, and we end up becoming more of an advertising agency, weirdly, because the clients wanted that. Certainly the clients that we were getting were worried about bigger. We were really set up to do big launches, post.com. Right. But Lord Bell said something, we didn't really get on much, but he did say something that at that time that I found really fascinating and true, which was, he said, when you're in the service industry, darling, that's the way he spoke. When you're in the service industry, darling, it really doesn't pay to be too far ahead of your market. And actually, he was absolutely right.
Why is that? Because no one knows what you sell or how to use it.
Because you're in if you're a service industry, you've got to be there to fulfill a need. You can't be ahead of the need. And the same is true of any form of innovation. It's not the people who create the innovation that make the money. Often it's the second wave that come in and pick it up and do something practical and useful with it. So I can't remember where that was going.
Well, the last thing you said reminded me of the principle of, the person who starts a movement is not the initiator, it's the first follower. It's the first one to actually get on board with them. And it took me back to what we were saying about the fascination around new things like Meta, about being too far ahead of the market.
Yeah.
And you were alluding to a method of sales, which I don't have a huge amount of respect for, which is obfuscating and trying to look so complicated and confusing that people assume they're too stupid to get it, and it must be really valuable.
Yes.
You favor being much...
It was simpler, across the board. Mm-hmm. I look at industries that complicate and go, you're hiding something. The financial industry, I go, why does it have to be so complicated? Yep. And it's because there's an entire industry built out of, the intermediary market is there to make sure that
it's too complex.
Yeah, it's too complex. Let me simplify that for you. And you look at the car industry. We launched Cinch. We created the brand. And the whole thing was around, the problem is it's complicated. And, for most people, not for petrol heads love the complication. They're like geeks, tech geeks. They love the complexity because they can understand it, and it's a language they want to speak. But for your average Joe, for you, me, and for our mums, we loathe it. And when you go into a car dealership and they start with the jargon, you're out of control. And when you're out of control, you're being sold to, and you begin to lock down. We're basically saying we just need to make it. Our job is to remove the faff. Our job is to make it easy for people. And Cinch was born. So it's about there is a big market in simplifying categories.
Yeah.
And there is a key role to come into a market and be the simplifier, especially those complex markets.
Yeah, and especially like we've been sort of, the theme that's pervaded this whole discussion is the world feels like it's complicating all the time. Technology is improving so rapidly we can almost see it moving past us before our eyes, and that causes anxiety because partially for the reasons of things moving quickly, it can make you feel like you're aging quickly and becoming less relevant. But, it can just feel like the things are moving beyond your control. So simplification is a good way to put people's mind at rest instead of adding to the chaos.
Yes. And I've yet to see a situation made better by complexity.
That's
generally true. that if you can simplify, I think Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. And one of the benefits of getting older is that you begin to look for the truth, the simplicity. What is it that we're actually trying to say here, or what is it that we're actually trying to do here? And the complexity, it becomes an anathema. You start to develop rashes when people go off on one.
Drayton Bird, the great writer, I'm hoping to interview while he's still alive. He's referred his LinkedIn community to a Churchill quote, and it was in a discussion about good copy.
Yeah,
because I don't know if this has always been the case, or I'm just paying more attention to it now. I have an interest in the industry. Feels like there's a real obsession with, on hero films or just moving image content generally, filling it with copy, making the script go from one end all the way to the other. Unlike, some good ads have just a tiny bit at the end. Drayton Bird referred to a Churchill quote. He said, "Use words everyone knows, then everyone will understand."
Yes. I think that's 100% true. But the other, especially writing for film, people need to realize that is a radically different definition of writing, because you shouldn't be. It doesn't mean you're writing words. You can write silence in a film. You can write a moment in a film, and I talk to a lot of the junior teams here coming in. It's like, don't write your that it's too full of dialogue.
Yep, you're not Aaron Sorkin.
We're not that great at it. Write it right now. Show me the same script with no dialogue, and then let's see what is essential and what isn't here.
Trying to do it in like Hitchcock's idea of pure cinema, where you should be able to know what's going on without dialogue.
Yeah, and actually, it's sort of generally, unless you are really, really good, you're not going to do it. You're going to. I see people repeating that. I've written something that looks like an ad. I've written something that sounds like ad dialogue or a jingle, and that's when you should be, as opposed to going, "I've done it." You should be going, "Oh, I fucked it."
Yeah,
I've just done what everybody else does.
If it sounds and looks like formula, then that's by definition what it is. The most painful thing is when it can be characterized to the point of caricature. Someone made a TikTok the other day, or maybe an Instagram reel, that one of my colleagues at Gas Music sent to me. He said, if punters can get advertising into this small of a box successfully, then we're doing something wrong. And he said, all British adverts sound like this. It was like, the all-night revisers and something in there. Yeah.
I've seen it. I show it to the teams here. It's how did we get to a place where it's that easy to
just sort of Betjeman-esque, listing poetry?
It's really lazy. It's but like sort of slightly rhymey, mood filmy guff, and consumers. It just woof. And when you think you're putting a ton of media money behind something like that, it is genuinely madness.
Yeah.
There's a great film called Art and Copy. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was made maybe 10, 15 years ago, and it interviewed sort of all the big names in advertising sort of post. It was around the time of the first sort of early Mad Men. And there was a woman from Nike, head of brand back in the day, and she was despairing about, she said, if you look at the shit on our TV screens, she goes, that was presented in a boardroom somewhere with a lot of intelligent people, and not one of them put their hand up and went, is anybody going to find this interesting? Is this good? And I think again, back to the complexity, you can put so much complexity around something that everybody goes, well, it must be good because we've been through a really complex process. Whereas if you apply some simplicity to it and say, one, is it impactful? So are people going to notice it? And two, is it going to say something that's going to make me want to do something? You don't need to do it. You don't need to do anything else. Yeah, is that? So back to the horrors of complexity. It's not only bad bad to live through in terms of your working process, it leads to appalling. It leads to some of the worst results.
Yeah.
And you see it again in that sort of box ticky type advertising. You know when somebody's given you a list.
And make sure these people engage.
It's got to cover all these. It needs to say all these things.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's an old saying that positioning is sacrifice. So what are you prepared to sacrifice in terms of to get your message across?
In the same way that basically all businesses or people trying to access a market will say, well, we're just for everyone. We serve everything. We serve, restaurants started doing it in about, I don't know, it felt like in the decade that I was, when I was working in hospitality.
Yeah.
All like gastropubs started serving everything. They started doing curry. They started doing breakfast. They started doing, it's like, it's clearly it's a clear attempt to try and appeal to every single market. You saw it happen. Someone does a great deconstruction of the Star Wars prequels in the early part of this century, that there was a clear need to have a kind of toy that would appeal to every kind of child. You know what I mean?
It's generally a recipe for disaster. I don't think I've only seen it done well once that I liked it, which was Victoria Bitter. It was an Australian ad done, I think, by Droga back in the day. Mm-hmm. And it was basically calling out all the different types of beer drinkers. And you could see that the brief was this beer appeals to everybody. And somebody had gone, oh no. But they really worked on it.
Yep.
And it was great. It's worth Googling. It's Victoria Bitter. And I think the line is whatever flag you fly under or something, whatever banner you fly under.
Yeah.
But it's just a procession. It's done like a procession of people going to a pub.
Yeah. All
different types of people, and it calls them all out.
But you've seen it happening a lot in the last 5 years or so, of everyone trying to be like, yeah, we appeal to every sector of the market.
Yeah.
And when you appeal to everything, you kind of, by definition, appeal to no one, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of these behaviors are driven by fear. It's just sort of, we can't rule anybody out. We've got to, and again, there are a lot of negative behaviors in the process of creating good advertising and marketing that come from fear. So you'll see juniorizing. You'll see an over-reliance on research.
Juniorizing.
I'm sending junior people to the meeting.
Got it.
I'm not there. I wasn't there when that decision was made.
Yes.
You'll see research, tons of research, way too much research.
Yeah.
There's no sense of actually an informed gut instinct. I don't mean gut instinct as in a crazy sort of, let's take a winger on this. Yeah. It's like, I know what I want to say. I believe that's going to do it for us.
Yes.
So there's a sort of, all these behaviors are kicking up dust around. Actually, this is a highly dangerous situation for me professionally to be in, because it's going to be very visible. Mm-hmm. And I don't want somebody going, well, why is that only appealing to this section of the market? Because even if I say, well, that is the most profitable section of the market, they may go, yeah, but you've just excluded 30% of, So you end up with something, blander that is, that actually doesn't really appeal to anybody, but on the surface ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, it's like there's a thing Rory Sutherland says in Alchemy about 1 times 10 not being the same as 10 times 1. Yes. And that's kind of, I know that sounds like waffly and irrelevant, but it's that fear is saying, well, there's 10, let's say there's 10 sectors of the marketplace, and it's better to appeal to each one in each of those sectors than just to all of one of them.
I think it was Bernbach who said, if you're going to stand for something, yes, people will stand against you, but people will stand for you. If you don't stand for anything, no one will stand for you and no one will stand against you. Yeah. So it's like, it's working out what you believe. I've always said, and it's a great quote by a guy called Roy Disney. I don't know who Roy Disney is. I think he's a sort of sibling of Walt. But he said, decisions are very easy to make once you know what your values are. Once you know what you stand for, then it's really easy to make a decision.
Yep.
When you don't know when you're trying to appeal to everybody, it's very difficult. So I think there is a thing personally, professionally, from a brand point of view, is know what you stand for and stick to it.
Yes. And that the thing to stand for cannot just be get money.
Yeah.
Because there's a million ways to do that. You need to. Nils Leonard said that at some talk or other. I saw him saying, a lot of agencies just set up and say, well, we're great, so you should use us. Yeah. And you need to have like an actual mission statement. And it sounds like where we started off, the mission statement here is you have to actually adapt creatively to what your consumers want and need. You can't be calling yourself creative agency if you're just basically an outsourcing production company for expensive media.
Yeah, 100%. And you've got to look at the money you spend on marketing and go, who actually benefits from this? Because if you're just enriching media owners, it's like you're wasting your money. If somebody said, right, I've got 20 million quid, we need these amount of customers, there's a much more creative way to get to solve that problem than producing a TV ad and spending
just splurging it all on
with
ITV for a month. Sorry, ITV.
Also, it's like you will get. It's really difficult. It's not like the old days where you get hit 80% of the population with one ad on ITV Coronation.
Yeah, no, it's not the Morecambe and Wise Christmas special anymore.
No, they're all over the place. I mean, you just look at, I look at my own family situation. There'd be four of us watching on with probably 6 different devices on the go.
Yeah.
And it's completely different. But the one thing that does travel, and what we talk about here is when you create something really interesting, really punchy or spiky or just funny, people will share it. And when so that becomes a goal, because if we set out to do that, if we get our market to share our work, if we get our market to do our marketing for us, your media budget explodes exponentially. Therefore, it becomes a really simple way of assessing creative work. Is like, how far will this idea travel before I have to put media money behind it?
That's an immense principle. I never thought about that. Can you think of any good examples on the spot?
There's this isn't an Iris one, but just Tesla in itself, it's like you go...
They don't put ads out.
They don't. I've never seen that. But, this is back to, what you are speaks louder than what you say. It's like, I've never seen an ad from Tesla, but oh my God, how loud are Tesla enthusiasts about everything? How loud is the media about Tesla? So there's a thing that just says, actually, their position, what they stand for is interesting enough for people to talk about. Their founder, what he stands for is interesting enough for people to talk about. So just creating something that is interesting in the first place, putting it out there. And again, social enables us to do this. You can put it out there. If nobody picks up on it, then you try again. If they do pick up on it, you may want to go, actually, let's put media money behind that. Let's get that out there. But it's interesting to watch how it's developed. I was talking the other day about, we did this job a few years back for Purdy's energy drinks with Idris Elba. And it was the idea is Purdy's is a herbal energy drink, and it's in the category with Red Bulls and Monsters, and that is hyped up, over caffeinated energy, and it's about clubbing all night. And the idea that we had for Purdy's was actually, the insight we had was, this is a gentler sort of energy, and maybe it's like it's to fuel something maybe more substantive, maybe something a bit deeper. So the idea was around fueling forgotten dreams, fueling forgotten ambitions. And we had Idris going around asking people, what do you want to be when you grow up? And people of all ages, and saying, is that really what you wanted to be when you were a kid? And why didn't you become that? And, why have you given up that passion in your life? And what we found with this film was, it went mental. It was like, it went global. And interestingly, it got more shares than likes. And we were looking at that. Got loads of likes, but it's the first thing we've ever done that had more shares than likes. And when you like something, it's because it's just you saying, I like it. When you share it, it's because it says something about you.
Yeah.
So we went, ooh, right, okay, that's a really interesting place to be, isn't it, as well? So there's like, that in the true sense of what a brand says about me, that's the power of a good insight. That's the power of something simple.
I'm happy to actually share the work, yeah. Like the one I always use, the example I use for that, just with an ad, is the Audi, I think it was 1995, with the obnoxious stockbroker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell Charles I'm on the way. And we watched that in our flat, and we watched it like 3 times because it was so funny.
Yeah.
And it's like a load of ads try and be funny. And, you know, that's the acid test. Do people share it without having to put money behind it?
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
But that is at the heart of modern marketing. If you can get your market to do your marketing for you, job done. So therefore, reverse back from that to what sort of work is that going to take? And that's going to have to be interesting. It's going to have to be challenging. It's going to have to be really fresh and original. And it's going to have to say something pretty unique. And if we, how many briefs does anybody see that has that on it?
Well, I don't think I could put a better full stop on it. So I think perhaps we'll leave it there till next time. But Shaun McIlrath, thank you for giving me this time. And as what I'm now going to say, as usual, really interesting conversation. Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers, Shaun.
Cheers. Bye.